Well, hello, hello. We are back again for another Other Ink Thursday, and this time I'm joined by Kathleen Mercury, a game designer and educator, and also involved in planning GAMA Expo, which we're also going to talk about. Welcome, welcome. Thank you for doing this.
Thanks for having me. This is great.
And we've already discussed the Pee-wee's Playhouse background. So if there's anything that you'd like to, since that's the most visual thing there, you want to start there and why that background as like a way to get started.
Well, this is will certainly date myself, but as a kid, I was a member of both the Pee Wee Herman fan club and the Ernest P. Worrell fan club. So if you remember like Ernest Saves
Hmm.
Christmas or any of
Hmm.
those, that so that informed my childhood quite a bit. Uh, but I just love the quirky subversiveness of Pee Wee's Playhouse. Like even watching it now, you watch stuff and you're just like, it's like so fun, like all the jokes that they slip in that, like the best kind where kids don't get it, adults do. It's actually the
Hmm.
first kids show to ever have a toilet.
Okay, that's a fun fact. That's a
That's a
fun
fun
fact.
fact.
Uh, and so like part of this interview when I meet someone and I interacted with you last year at
Hmm.
GAMA Expo, and then we saw each other in passing at Gen Con this year.
Right.
Um, and but I know so little about you, so I want to hear more about you, and learn who you are and stuff. So I'm like, let's schedule an interview, and then I'll get to find out. But I ask about the background because it's like
Mm.
I don't know you that well, but like the fact that you have this background and this like quirky and like I like to like do things on multiple levels, it just seems so appropriate. So like, is it? It seems both a like origin story and also like a continuing vibe, right? Like,
Yeah,
it,
and the background actually blocks my actual office, but my actual office looks like my
it's
also
painted
my
in
full
exactly the same colors.
I'm a maximalist. Now, it's not
Ooh.
maximalist in that I want things piled up, but every inch of wall space is accounted for with some sort of art or thing. I've got lots of fun objects on shelves. My classroom was like that. I can, if you
Mm.
want for show notes or anything, I can send you pictures, but literally it was fully wrapped all the way around with stuff. I had three giant cabinets all full of board games back in the day. And I had so much stuff hanging from the ceiling too, so that when people would come into my room, they'd just be like, "Whoa," and it was great because someone said like, "Oh, your classroom is too much for some kids." I
Mm.
said, "Well, you know what? That means all the rest of the classrooms are not enough for some kids as well."
Mm.
And I always figured too, being a gifted teacher, if I wasn't interesting enough, if the work we were doing wasn't interesting enough, then I owed it to them to give something that would, spark creativity, give them something else to look at. And I think
Yeah.
and that's kind of the same way for me is just being surrounded by, I've got lots of art from different artists, movie posters of things. I mean, like most of us do. I've got a sign right by the door. It's like a hand lettered sign, stop, think, there must be a harder way.
Mm.
So when I saw that, I was like, yes, yes, please. But yeah,
Uh,
I think the environment matters a lot to me, and having a really creative space where I feel comfortable, like I would live in this room,
mm.
which is what I would want it to be.
Right. I mean, and I'm sure it's at your, you said it's your office, so like you do live in that room. Like you spend a lot of time there, I'm sure.
I do. In fact, the university where I work, I'm adjunct, so I, mainly work from home. Well, they have an office that's, I've been building up my work and responsibilities there, and they've got an office space that I have, and they're like, and it has windows. And part of me is like, if I go there, I'll be working in basically an empty box with windows right on campus, or I can work here in my happy little nests. Yeah,
Right, right.
yeah. I'll be there one day a week.
Yeah, right. I mean, as I'm sure, whatever you do as much as you are required to. That's, whatever.
Right.
Um, all right. So I didn't mean to start the interview with that, but I did accidentally anyway. So what you mentioned board games on your shelf in your
Mm-hmm.
classroom. So like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna guess that you started with. So let's start there with board games. Like, when did board games come into your life, and when, and what are some of your favorites? Just t talk about like how you became.
Yeah.
Wind back from like I'm a teacher with a shelf full of board games. Like, when did
Well,
what are
you really can't. extricate either one from the other because I
Yeah.
was in about 20 years ago, I went to a Gifted Association of Missouri conference, as you do. And I went to a session on using board games in the classroom. And I was like, I love board games. Clue was my favorite game as a kid. And the instructor or the presenter was talking about Stratego, how every gifted classroom needs to have a copy of Stratego. Well, I played board games with my three sisters and I had no brothers. So we didn't have boy games like they were
Uh-huh.
back then. So Risk,
Gosh.
Stratego, all that. We didn't have
Yeah,
that.
those are so boy-coded, aren't they?
So boy coded. Um, I mean, luckily
I,
now, things are better, obviously,
I
but
think I've seen like a Barbie version of Stratego. It's like, didn't they do one of
absolutely.
those?
I hope so. I hope so. My Little Pony Risk. I mean, do what you got to
Hmm.
do.
Yeah,
And it's not like because they don't spoiler alert, they don't need to be about war. Or just they can be lots of different things and they'll still work and they'll still be fun. Anyway,
sure.
so I didn't know much about oh, sorry. I didn't know much about board games and about Stratego. And so I researched it. And that's when I found Board Game Geek. And that's when I discovered this whole other world of board games. So I started, long story short, I end up at a board game meetup in St. Louis, where I'm from. And the very first night we played Pandemic and then Cash and Guns. And I was like, this is
Those are
instantly
those are
my
two
favorite thing ever. You
those
know,
are two very engaging, beginner-friendly games.
yeah, co-op blew my
Hmm.
mind, you
Mm.
know. And as a teacher and someone who is rapaciously anti-gun, Cash and Guns was really fun.
Now, did
Yeah,
did you have the orange guns, or did somebody spring to get the European import, which has gray foam guns?
I I think actually you know, I'm sure
Doesn't matter.
someone
It
had,
doesn't matter.
that's a really good point. We'll say both. But we did, I mean, but we had like the Yakuza expansion and
Mm,
all that with
hmm.
like the little, with the sword and the throwing stars and all that. Yeah. So instantly I was like, this is my favorite thing. And so it was when I was playing more games and I realized, and we played one, I think my sister picked it up for me to thrift shop. I don't remember, but it was Powerpuff Girls Saving the World Before Bedtime, which is an amazing game by Craig Van Ness. And I didn't know that any of that. I just like, this is really fun. And I thought my students can make these games.
Mm,
And I think that's one of the things with kids games. You think, oh, that's so easy. Anybody can do it. But
right.
that was one of the things about me is if I don't know how to do something, I'm gonna try it anyway. I'm gonna fake it till I make it. I'm okay to make mistakes. I'm okay to learn. Like, let's just do it. And so I told my kids, like, hey, let's design games. And what started as a 3-week unit for my students ended up becoming a semester long unit that could easily go. And then I've taught game design to kids. So it was like about 15 years when I was at my middle school. I have taught classes to high school kids. I've taught in the collegiate setting. I've done after school clubs with kids, but I've also, more excitingly, I put all of my game design resources for free at kathleenmercury.com. Ding.
Ooh,
I charge nothing for them. I monetize nothing. I have to pay for the website hosting.
sure.
And because my school was so generous, like they would let me go to BGG Con as professional development,
I mean, that's a good work if you can get it. That's
Right. I mean, and there's times where I'm glad I've, taken the choices that I did, that I'm not there anymore, because it was time for me to move on and do other things. But man, that was the best job in the world. I gotta tell you. Uh,
so tell me a little bit about like what that I mean, you don't have to get into like the standards and like the pedagogy and stuff like that, but like unless you want to. But like when you're teaching a module, like what is of
mhm,
like we're gonna do, you said like a few weeks of game design. Like did you bring out
mhm,
like here is Catan, it uses a modular board. Here is I'm trying to think of some other whatever. You bring out some
mhm.
games and you play them as a class or play them in groups and show them how it's done. Or I'm thinking of for sale, right, where you've got multiple
Right.
layers of
Yeah.
economic system, or here's an
Mhm,
auction mechanic in this game. Great. Now that you've
mhm.
seen all the pieces, go design your own games. Or are you more like coming into it from like, what are your ideas? kids and then like, okay, here's some examples of things that fit that. Like,
hmm I mean, the nice thing about 15 years is you find a lot of ways that don't work.
uh-huh.
You find ways that work for some and don't work for others. And you find some things that you never quite resolve to be satisfactory. But there's definitely things that I have learned over the years. I'm actually writing a book on this as part of a book series on games and game design. So just because I think it's such a there's a lot of, I don't want to say mistakes. I just say I've learned a lot over the years. And if I can help people kind of slingshot past some of those things. One of the big ones is gaming literacy, which what you're talking about. You know, we can go high level and talk about games as art, as a medium, and all those sorts of things. But functionally speaking, if you want to do something, you have to know what is in that medium. You have to
Hmm.
know, you don't have to necessarily even know the names of board game mechanics, although I do think it helps. When you're working with kids, you have to give them exposure to games that aren't the traditional kids' games because Shoots and Ladders, sorry, Candyland, they all pretty much play the same way. They roll and move, you know, randomizer dictates the number of spaces you go, and you have to break kids out of that.
Yeah,
And so,
I made a game in elementary school and it was a roll and move game, you know, like
be,
that's because that's what I'd seen.
because all artists work off references, and if you have
Hmm.
nothing else to draw from, you know, it's like the mathematician who found the book on basic algebra, you know, who, you know, has figured out everything to calculus plus plus plus, and they're still figuring out new things that he wrote about, right? Right. That was one guy. So probably one game designer out there has, you know, played Candyland would be like, wouldn't it be interesting if we had
Hmm.
workers and we could place them places and then had a deck that we could build? You know, I'm sure they're out there, and if you are, awesome. But
Yeah.
I can't take that. Middle school, we got to move. So, what would happen is the first week, I would have short games that they could open the box, learn the rules, play, and finish in 45 minutes. But they had to be fun because there are lots of games I would try to get kids to play. Alhambra is a great game, and I've been doing this a long time, which is why I'm talking about some very old games here. Alhambra is a great game, but you know, with interesting things with the money cards and the tile placement, boring and dry to kids.
It's a
Didn't
little
work.
slow. It's a little
It's
slow.
well, but not only that, it's just thematically so dry that they don't care, you
I mean,
know.
it's like that classic Euro game from that era, right? Where it's like
Mhm.
it's a very interesting system. It's got the money
Right.
thing, but it's like, you know, you're drawing from a stack of tiles and placing them on the board and it can't put this here, can't put this here. Let me think
Mhm.
about it a little bit more. Like
Right.
it's engaging, but not necessarily for a middle schooler, in that
Right.
way.
Right.
Not for every middle schooler. I'm sure some kids love it.
Right. So Star Wars Carcassonne is is great. It's hard to find and very expensive now, but it takes out the farms. It's got a really fun dice rolling battle mechanic. The theme is so much more accessible to kids. And I mean, it plays as a different game. There are things that I think are more exciting and appeal more to kids. I mean, farms are so hard to explain conceptually in a way that people can really use them to their strategic advantage. And then at the end of the game, they're like, oh, as adults, we're okay with that. Kids, not so much. So the games that I like to use a lot were Hey, That's My Fish, Powerpuff Girls, Villains at Large, another Craig Van Ness game that's worth hunting down. It's a really nifty little card game. Rumble in the Dungeon, or also Cthulhu in the House. ELO made them. I don't know who has them now. It's like a hidden identity sort of game. You have way less agency over it than you think you do, but kids love it. Walk the Plank from Mayday is another great one. Get Bit. And so what I was looking for with them are
Yeah.
game mechanics that they could easily understand so that when they started to design their own games, they could rip off them and apply them to their own games that they're choosing. And it doesn't take much to give kids a few little things to work with, and
Hmm.
then how they will just expand on that and go and go and go is really super cool. But you cannot have people expect people to teach games um, without giving them that exposure. The other
Yeah.
thing is if kids will design the games that you present to them, they'll use stuff from Get Bit, and from, you know, Walk the Plank and all that. So if you don't want them to design social deduction games, don't have them play social deduction games. Social deduction games are great if that's what you want to do, but you just have to be careful with what you present to them so that you can help guide them through whatever process you want. I'm a big believer in design constraints,
Mm.
removing enough options from people so that they have to design it a very specific way. And that works out better often in my mind. So people can
Yeah.
disagree.
Well, I sure, yeah, it definitely helps when you're doing a thing.
Hmm.
I've been doing at cons the last couple of years these 15-minute game jams where it's like you start the timer and that's you get 15 minutes and that's it. And then like,
Yeah.
usually that 15 minutes flies by because you're
Hmm.
under that time pressure and then like the timer beeps and you're like, well, no more game design. We can talk about in
Hmm.
theory what we would develop next, but like that's it. But
Yeah.
yeah, it does any sort of constraint like that pushes you
Hmm.
forward or in a direction.
Right.
Picking the right constraints, I guess, is the to get the desired outcome, right? And I guess what
Right.
is like one thing I was thinking about as you were talking is like what is the assignment part of it? Like is it any game or is there like we're doing you need to do something that's got like a money in this one or an auction system because then that's going to tie into the math lesson and like there's a cross those sort of
Hmm.
cross
Well,
relationships between other teachers and stuff like that or and that's the assignment is make an auction game or is it like make any game?
couple things. And I started doing what I called Lightning multi-game jams back in 2019 at
Yeah.
table, and I did 3 10-minute games
Ooh,
in an hour. Like I'd give them the
that's
stuff, give them the prompt, 10 minutes, boom. And you're not actually designing the whole game, but the thing that you want to remove is like not the analysis paralysis, but more to usher towards the like in the design world bias towards action, right? That you're going to be if you're just going to sit there and think about it, it's a perfect idea in your head. But when you actually start doing it, you're still thinking, but then you're going to iterate much quicker, much more quickly than you will by just filling up a paper full of ideas. So I'm
mhm.
absolutely with you there. So you're like 15. I'm like, oh, you're generous. But so for the assignment itself, there's two main things that came of this. One is there's the social emotional learning. Now I worked with gifted kids and like there's a lot of stereotypes. They look like every other kid in the school. From your super kids on the spectrum to kids who are your perfect little bouncy numbers. So there's not that, but all of us in middle school need help, right? And so learning how to create the skills that they will need to create the life you want is the goal for me, that they can take on challenges and develop the confidence to come up with some sort of, not just confidence in themselves to build up, to solve the problem, but also to help them develop the skills that they need to work through problems creatively, especially with other people. So
Yeah.
how to give feedback, how to get feedback, how to work on a deadline, how to accept the fact that you made something really bad and you're going to put work into it and hopefully it will be slightly less bad. And
Yeah.
now take that to kids who are used to, for the most part, certainly not all, being successful in all of their classes in school. Teacher gives the assignment, they do it, they get an A on it, they move on.
Mhm.
Whereas Kathleen Mercury, the teacher angel of death, says, has you put an unfinished game in front of other people, it doesn't work. They give you all these ideas. Now, how do you keep going from that? And a lot of what I did was just coaching kids to help them learn and understand their own process as much
Mhm.
as that. Now, they made legit games. Some kids made some really, really good games. So I didn't limit them too much on the types of games that they could make. They could not have any weapons in them that weren't school appropriate. I kind of looked the other way a little bit on like swords and magic wands. But because I never
Sure.
needed to have, teacher has kids create guns where they shoot each other. Nope, didn't need that one.
Hmm.
No event decks because when the game wasn't working, kids will be like, I want to make an event deck. It's like, okay, you just threw a bomb on a forest fire. It's
Yeah.
hard to tell what's burning, but you just made a bigger mess. So
Hmm.
helping kids to think logically, as far as like what's going to happen. Okay, if you put in this rule, what are the implications of it? So it's so much process oriented, but because games are fun and they get to play each other's games in classes and give each other feedback, that was enough,
Yeah.
to like have them keep going with the process.
It sounds great. It sounds great. Like I wish I had this class when I was in middle school, right? I'm
Hmm.
sure I remember I think it was in high school I had a assignment to design a game and I think it was with a partner and we did some sort of pirate movement on a grid and I don't really remember what the point of
Hmm.
it was. So like but like I don't think we succeeded in making like a good game. But technically in that like you're moving around a board and trying to accomplish things, I guess it was a game. Um,
I
but
mean,
having a
even
more
now, go ahead.
just having a more deliberate like that process of review and like
Hmm.
revision and stuff is we didn't do that. It was just like go off and make a game and then, you know, I
Right,
don't remember
right.
why. I don't even remember why.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, we spent about a quarter like learning games and making a little game and all that. And then the second quarter was really spent on their one game and all the parts that play testing and feedback and iterating on it and all that. But even so, it's like I have a hard time making a not bad game in 9 weeks, So that's one of the things is like the first game that they'd ever play test in class would be one of mine.
Yeah.
And so that they could see how I did it and that it's real and that I was really listening and incorporating their ideas and they would see how I would, that was one nice thing about that class. I could get 15 play tests in a week if I wanted to.
Well,
That was
right. So this
pretty
seems like a
sweet.
natural the next question then is like is going through that process with students then what led you to do your own games eventually? Like when you've got, look, I have to make one to show them how it can be done, and then oh,
Hmm.
I think I had a good idea here, and like you're getting, like
Right.
you said, 15 play tests a week, and
Hmm.
and then you're like now I can take it out there and get it published,
Yeah.
or is
Yeah.
did that
Well,
come later?
Well, I've always been kind of a hedge witch designer. I mean, that's what appealed to me about teaching gifted kids in the first place was that I could make up my own curriculum that we could do. We want to do the first unit that I ever came up with for kids was on making crop circles. There's a lot of cool intersections of art and math with the design of them. You can get into pseudoscience and a whole bunch of other stuff. And we even had a parent let us make one on her front yard.
Mm.
So,
I
so
mean,
I'm
that sounds awesome.
Right. I mean, because it is. And so I've always been a designer. And I think in terms of game design was where it was starting to really come out. And then when I took some workshops from the Stanford D School, the design school, and really learned about design mindsets like bias towards action, radical collaboration, all these sorts of things, and then putting them into practice, understanding that fundamentally design starts with understanding the needs of your user to empathize with them. So it's all of those things that then it's like that the teacher and the game designer wheels were just starting to move more and more in sync. And so when I really internalized a lot of that. And so that's how, when it came to me making a game, it wasn't like well, they're doing it, so I should do it too. It was just like ideas just started popping. Wouldn't it be funny if there was a game about pigeons pooping on people? And that's the first game that I made and signed, which will not see the light of day, unfortunately, because it's just so expensive to make. But Dirty Birdie, bless, that's where it started.
Uh, I, well, I have to ask then about the like, does it involve like like a GAC-like product that you would have to pack the into the game? Like what makes that more, eh, if you can tell me, if you could
Oh
tell
yeah,
me.
yeah, 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 yeah. No, it's you can see it on my website, KathleenMercury.com. So Dirty Birdie is a three-dimensional urban landscape. So you're flying birds from
Um,
rooftop to rooftop, dropping poop cubes onto cars and people below on the streets on little tiles. Umbrellas are bad because you wasted it. You hit an umbrella. And then after everyone has two pigeon turns, then the falcon comes out, and I mounted pen holders in the corners I took an old TV antenna and I put a falcon pendant on a key ring, and everybody gets to take the falcon and like aim it and try to smash each other's pigeons off their buildings because falcons ate pigeons. They're both synanthropic species, meaning they thrive in urban environments.
Mm,
And so the game ends when someone runs out of poop. The falcon was a great balancing mechanism because like if you were running ahead on pooping on people, other players are just going to take out your birds, you know?
right.
And
So I
and
could start
so
to see how with all those components, if you're
oh
building
yeah.
three-dimensional cities or
Yes.
whatever, then like yeah,
Yes. Yes.
yeah, it's a yeah that that the
It's a
production costs are high, yes.
great. But you know what? The thing's a thing of beauty and I made it, you know, and it's
But
great.
I mean, Cleopatra and the Society of Architects exists, so like
Hmm.
I mean it that's got all those little plastic towers in it.
Yeah.
It
It was with the publisher for about 5 years. And then in the end, just with the company ebbs changes and
yeah.
Kickstarter rules and all kinds of other things after 5 years, so like we can't, you know, in all good faith, just keep hanging on to this for you, which was fine. I was willing to let them hang on to it because they really liked it, the people at the company. And like once a year, be like, okay, here's where we're at with it. I'm like, great, let's do it, you know. So yeah, so out of the 4 games I've pitched, I've signed 6 contracts total. One has come out, one is coming out, and 2 will never see the light of day, which, you know, it's okay because I've had, you know, sold games and gotten them back and all this. So,
Yeah, yeah.
you know, I've
I
gotten
mean,
paid I've gotten paid for 6 games,
hey,
and
that
you know,
you know,
and only had one come out. So,
that's that's winning that's winning, right? I mean,
right.
I mean, I think that's yeah, there's so many I- there's a lot of work that goes into making a game and
Hmm.
even like they don't all get to the finish line, like
Right.
you have ideas, then you either get preempted by somebody else or like the funding isn't there and so you have to set it
Hmm.
aside and like maybe you'll never get back to it. Or I mean, there's all kinds of reasons why games don't
Right.
get to that like you can buy it and sometimes you can buy it but like they only make like 100 copies and then like those 100 people
Hmm.
can buy it and then it technically came out or whatever but like
Right. I mean,
yeah.
Grease Lightning, my game from WizKids that came out in 2020. That's what my computer's sitting on right now. I mean, it's as much for, to make me smile. Like it's a thing. I made it. It's right there, you know, but
Yeah.
that happens too. Um, you know, for me, I decided a long time ago that I wasn't going to try to make this my career because
Mm,
teaching is my first love. And I like that this is my fun thing on the side. And so
yeah.
I don't really I'm not counting on it financially. God knows I spend way more money than I've ever made off games anyway, you know. So for me, it's something that I do for fun, and it gives me a reason to stay connected within the game industry. I love the people in the game industry. I get excited playing other people's prototypes. I love showing off my own prototypes. So the wins for me are not in any way, shape, or form financial. Do I want to see games get out there? Yeah, of course. But if nothing else gets published, nothing else gets signed, would I do it anyway? Yeah, because
Yeah.
I love to do it. And so, but if other people want to make it their career, I am down to clown and help them out.
Sure. I mean, it is such a good place to be where you can be like kind of in charge of your own success in that way, where you're like I love my job. So like I'm gonna keep doing it, but then I'm also gonna do this
Hmm.
other thing and like, enjoy all the success I can there. Or enjoy just the process, like you said, like and you know, success is relative. I always talk to people about that, like what is success for them, and if it sounds like you're having fun doing the process, right? So,
Right. Yes. I actually just did a game design workshop at OrcaCon over the past weekend, and I
mm,
called it Game Design is for Everyone. And I started off by giving them dice and just like chuck them. Like, what are ways that you can have people use dice in a game that aren't just roll and move that prescribed number of spaces? And then we went to race games because they're the most familiar game structure and just playing around and iterating with all those things. And so along the way, I would stop to say, okay, whatever you're doing, stop that. Now do something totally different with the dice, you know, that sort of helpful instruction. And but it's in an like trying to create a really like an atmosphere of discovery and play.
yeah, yeah,
And the thing that I would come back to, it's like, okay, like I explained like what I was having them do, what type of design idea, like I was concept, mindset, whatever I was modeling for them. But also, you know, at the end, it was what part of the process worked for you. And I'm like very clear, like this is not about compliments represents for me the chef here. Nothing about
Hmm.
that.
Hmm.
Like it's about what worked for you and then what didn't work for you. And people were hesitant, to say something. But my friend Jess was there, Jess McGatha, she's awesome. And she's like, I had too many ideas and I didn't feel like I really got to work on them. It was just constantly changing, and that was just something I didn't like. And it was like, correct, good, because this process, my process may not work for you, but if you want to be a game designer, I don't care if you're making deck builders or RPGs or whatever, you have to understand what works for you as a process of creativity in order to be successful. If you try to do what you see other people doing, that's not going to work. So in this play space, what are the things that worked? What are the things that didn't? One group of people at table, they ended up sharing their information with each other so that they could create a Discord server so they could keep working on games because they just really liked, you know, working with each other even in that one session, like that's awesome. There's
Yeah.
not my favorite thing, the thing that drives me is to create opportunities for people that they would not have otherwise. So everything that I've done in terms of games and game design jams and teaching and everything is for that. That's just what makes me excited. When someone goes to a game jam, they're like, I've got to, it's like I have an idea that I want to keep working on. Absolutely. That's the
Right.
best.
Yeah. Both of those are so valuable, right? To like kind of get to try different ways of working and then find out what works best for you. And then also just have an ideation session with some other people and then take something away to go work on. Both of
Hmm.
those yeah, that's great.
Hmm.
Um, we, yeah, I mentioned the game jams that I have been doing the last couple of years. And it is one of them, about half of them have been written up as like this was a cool idea. Let's put it down, not just in
Hmm.
like the spontaneous thing, but only one so far has been like you could go download of a little text of so
Hmm.
because the my co-developer of that game, like he is also layout. He just put it out in a layout, so like it's a one
Hmm.
pager out there that you can get. It's like I think a trifold, not a quad fold little makes a one page thing, but it's
Hmm.
um but yeah, I mean they're like it's so fun to take that away or have that idea that you could go back and work on, like definitely
Hmm.
send a lot of emails about like, hey, here's a first draft of this thing we did and you want to develop it more, here it is,
Hmm.
it is fun to do that. Um
Hmm.
all right. I mean, you talked about OrcaCon and maybe I there's so many things to talk to you about. There's so many things to talk to you about. I want to hear a little bit more about you mentioned that the middle school stuff, you're not in middle school anymore. You're teaching, I
Hmm.
assume you're teaching teachers now to
Yes.
kind of do what you did. So like when you kind of already talked about it, but like when you take it to that level where you're I assume you're like teaching the teachers how to do some of the same game design stuff more broadly
Well,
being
indirectly.
in
So
gifted education or what are you doing now? What are you doing now?
I've taught high school.
If it's relevant.
Yeah, no, no, no. I've games and game-based learning will always be a thing. I just designed, as a freelancer, two projects for CERN, the lab in Switzerland, that are designed to help teach kids a little bit about cosmology, about particle physics. I made a collaborative puzzle. I made a classroom adventure, for a summer reading program. I have a RPG thing that's coming out called it's called Build Your Character. It's a one pager. It's a supplement to a summer reading log so that every time you read a book or whatever your targets are, you can pull a quote from the book and narratively
I mean,
build a character with a really
that's
simple.
that's simple and great. I love that.
Right. And so what I want to do is, especially for that one, is to, get it out there so that teachers can use that in their classroom as a way to sort of gamify their own classroom readings and what they're doing. Because yeah, I love that. And that's with iRead. Their theme for this upcoming summer is level up at your library. And
Mm.
so it's so the ILA, the Illinois Reading Association, iRead. And so I did that. But for my students, what I'm teaching is like is different. Like so this upcoming semester I'm teaching literacy for upper elementary. And I was middle school, so we're getting kind of fuzzy there on the grade
Yeah,
levels.
yeah.
But with this, so they're, going to be, in terms of, with the idea that upper elementary, they've hopefully learned to read. And obviously with the reading crisis in America, that's not always the case. But in a lot of classes, when people are teaching reading and especially writing, there's a lot of default to, narratives, opinion pieces, all of that. And so one of the two types of genres that I'm going to teach them about is interactive fiction, because I really love the parsley system of interactive fiction, which basically takes you're in a room, there's the exits are the east and the west, there's a body on the floor, what do you do? That computer parser system, but it has turned it into a paper-based system where the person running the game is the computer. And
Hmm.
so I had my students do this as a separate thing from the board game unit as a unit, and they would create the most amazing interactive fiction kind of worlds. Um, because it works in all aspects of literacy, from reading, writing, the speaking part, the listening part. It's really, and it's so interactive and engaging and fun. So I'm actually going to teach my elementary teachers about interactive fiction and how that can be a type of reading, a type of literacy unit for their students. Because like, what kid wouldn't love to like make up a game like that? You've got them doing
Right.
all the literacy skills,
It's
but you're doing it in a fun way. And that's
yeah,
my jam.
and it's right. It's sort of it is storytelling, but it's like a different way because of the nested prompt nature of it or whatever, where it's a very different
Hmm.
way to tell a narrative.
They'll have to figure out the story structure, but then there's also the part where they're not just telling a story just through what they've written, because they'll have those pre-written prompts. But to unite it all as a story, they're going to have to do oral storytelling, which you
Hmm.
don't get in a lot of literacy pieces. It tends to be, you read things and you write things. And so I'm really excited to see their response to this, and to see like what it can be for kids. Just because it's never been done doesn't mean it shouldn't be done.
Right.
Everybody and their mother wants more games-based learning, more games in the classroom, and I'm going to show them how they can do it.
Well, then you almost anticipate my next question because I was going to ask like what is the uh, response from your students who are in their education programs where they're like games in the classroom? I've never heard of that, or are they all like, yes, please, I'm happy to
Hmm.
incorporate that. I'm sure it's a mix, but like,
Right.
um,
Well, last semester I taught two sections on teaching English learners theory and methods. So when you have kids who, aren't fluent in English in the classroom, how do you take what you're doing and make it accessible to them? And so that was for secondary, so middle school and high school. So we've got math, science, PE. What do you do? And so games, especially when kids have to learn vocabulary, all kids have to learn vocabulary, no matter what your primary language is. And games are a great way to help kids play with language as they're learning and to get it to stick. And so I played a lot of, not as many as I wanted, but I played quite a few games with them in the class because party games, especially things like Just One.
thinking of
um,
code names.
Codenames is a little bit trickier because I mean
Yeah.
it can be done. It can be done, but if you've got a science unit where there's a lot of terms that are really closely related, that can
Yeah.
be trickier. But absolutely, absolutely, party games, telestrate. I mean, there's so many games that you can get for kids to, to Dixit.
Hmm.
There's so many different types of games you can use in the classroom to help support literacy. So I didn't get to do as much that I wanted to with games. Just because of time and like it's big enemies of teachers are time and money, right? So
Sure.
but I tried to, because especially if you're you can teach kids the straightforward way, or you can do it the fun way. Guess which way they prefer? And if the outcomes are the same, and I'm not saying everything is going to be like woo, Kathleen Circus, here we go, but man, kids would much rather play a bad game, a real bad game, than to not,
Yeah. Here's 25 words I wrote on the board. Look them up in your book and copy the definitions down so that you
right.
can, you're seeing even, I mean, that's sort of a almost a straw man argument. Think that's not, that's very bad pedagogy. Don't do that. But like, the idea of like looking the definition up and then writing it down and like you're seeing it on
Hmm.
I mean,
Hmm.
there's something there about the like memorization and
Hmm.
practice that you're using the word and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But
At my core,
that's not a fun assignment for a upper elementary or middle school or even high school student to
Right.
be doing, you know?
Yeah, we had in my we had an advisory class where you talk about social emotional learning stuff, but it's like with a hammer, you know. And in our school we had the five P's,
Mm.
polite, productive, positive. What are the other ones? I forget. Okay, it's been a
Well,
while.
they all start with P. Your acronym is
Petulant, pedantic. Um, no. So like we had to like teach the kids about it. And so what I did was I found some coloring book pages of luchadors, like the Mexican
Okay.
wrestlers, and what
Yeah,
they had to
yeah.
do was come up with wrestling moves. I broke them up into five teams for the five P's. They had to come up with wrestling moves that amplified their things. So like positive, polite, prepared, like, so what would be a wrestling move that Mr. Prepared would? It's like, I have brought my chair to the match, And so then it
Uh,
was just
uh,
silly.
I
So then
mean, that game could come out. You could put that as an activity book and that could just come out. Like that's
right.
like done. Like
Yeah.
print it.
Right. So I put a big stool in the middle and I had a bell, like a dinner up bell, but you get in wrestling, you got a bell. And so when they would battle, they would ring the bell and they would say their thing. And the bell served no other purpose other than kids really love to ring the damn
It's
bell.
like the bell. It's the bell in what's it the in Pit. In if
Pit.
Pit comes with a bell, it
Hmm.
makes it better to play Pit if you've got a bell. Like
Yes, yes. And so they ring the bell and they would do that, and the other kids would vote on who was like the best team, and then they'd have their finishing move. And, it's one of those things where I didn't know what the five P's were before this, but after we did this, like I knew the five P's. And I know I'm supposed to know it, I'm the teacher, whatever. We got enough stuff going on to remember the damn five
sure,
P's, but I knew
sure,
what they
sure.
were because you could link it too. Because, like, as I'm sitting here, I was trying to think what were some of the moves, and it's like, I brought my chair. That's Mr. Prepared. So when games give you, they break the rules of science and society. They give you the
Mm.
opportunity to create really bad simulations, but that also means you can really hone in on specific parts of that simulation, for the purpose of the game. It's this one
Yeah,
interaction
yeah, yeah.
in
Yeah,
life that we're going to turn into an hour and a half,
we're not trying. It's like all metaphors are that way, where it's like once you start breaking down the metaphor, it breaks down. Like you're not supposed to analyze it beyond the single simile that was stated, right? But then, so
Yes.
anyway, yeah, it's the same with the game. Like, right, yeah, it's a luchador wrestling match, but it's vocabulary and like, oh, but what about the like? That's not related to this thing. It's
You
like,
could
stop.
use
You've already
that.
thought about it too much.
Right.
Just do the moves. Like that's all this game is.
Right. You could use that in a science class where you're teaching mitosis. You know what I mean? And here comes mitochondria. And what are its professional wrestling moves?
It's the powerhouse of the
That's
cell.
literally the
All th
answer.
He's
But
all.
like the organelles, I don't know what they do. I'm sure it's
Mhm.
something important. I'm middle school science certified. I don't remember the damn organelles. There's a lot of things I've been doing. It gets crowded. But the point is if I had a game where there was like Mr. Organelle or Ms. Organelle or whatever,
Right,
boom, Organelle's going to drop a hammer on mitochondria that mitochondria did not expect. And especially
right.
when kids are really connecting the idea to that function and making it work. Like, psh, yes,
Uh,
anyone can
well,
use my idea for free. You're welcome.
yeah. I mean, this sounds great. Like, if you could turn out classes of teachers that are going to put this kind of attitude into the classroom, then
Hmm.
that sounds great. That's doing good work.
Thanks.
All right. We I do want to ask you a little bit about Gamma. Speaking about like schedules and classrooms and
Mm.
all this sort of stuff. Because this is being recorded in January, but we're going to release it in February, and
Hmm.
also in February is the GAMA Expo
Hmm.
for the Game Manufacturers Association, their annual conference,
Hmm.
and it's in my city of Louisville, Kentucky, again this year,
Hmm.
and that's where why I know you at all because you connected with me last year to, and I was on
Hmm.
a panel, and I'm on one again this year about
Hmm.
game narration in games, both
Hmm.
tabletop and well, tabletop games of all sorts, right? Both
Right.
cube pushers all the way up to dice chuckers, like whatever.
Right.
I don't know. We
Right.
haven't planned it yet. We got to plan it. But the
That'll be fine.
uh, so tell me a little bit more about that and like all of the things. I think like I'm gonna guess that like from your point of view, like everything that you've been talking about for the last 40 minutes or so is like you see it as exactly the same, just bringing that sort of like energy to like, but it's a very different environment than like a
Right.
middle school classroom. So like, what is the process like of getting the panelists together and being sort of
So
in charge of that and
yeah. Well, I'm on the team. I mean, I'm definitely
right, you're part of the
like
team.
yeah, I'm hired to sort of like herd the cats in a lot of ways. So I was asked to do this last year when they decided to put together a one day Sunday sort of pre-conference day for creators, and it was really successful. I know one of the people who was working for Gamma knew of my background as a teacher and all the things that I've done and knew I wasn't working as a teacher, and so wanted to say, "Hey, you could do this." And like, yes, I can. I mean, if you can plan the field trip with seventh graders, like you can do this. So, and so it was a one day
That sounds
thing.
hard to me.
Oh, oh. So what you do is when they're staying in their hotel rooms, you put tape on the door. So if they try to
Mm.
sneak out, they bust the tape off. Pro tip. They don't they're more likely to try to jump off the balconies that you can't tape than, but that's a whole other issue. But anyway,
That's
moving on.
yeah, having I've been on the trips, yeah, like it does seem
Yeah.
like falling off the balcony is more likely than sneaking out
Yeah.
at
Did
night.
they fall? Was it a fall though? Anyway, so so this year, they asked me to come back on again because of the herding cats aspect. And so um for this year, we are actually taking all the content for designer days, we called it. And so the creator track is integrated through the whole of GAMA Expo. This is really exciting because there's just a lot more time. There's a lot more sessions. There's space for play testing. There's split space for meetings that we'll be able to have so that creators will now have a fully fleshed out track the way that retailers have or publishers. So that's really exciting. The team is great. We've got Matt Fantastic, who's the creator, division, whatever this title is. I'm so sorry, Matt. But basically, he's on the board for the creators. Heather O'Neill from Ninth Level Games, who's also very active in Unpub. James Louder, who is freelance RPGs going back forever, who's just has so much knowledge and experience from working in the industry for so long. Ross Thompson, who has done a number of different things, you know, and really active in so many aspects of games and promotion and supporting people and, you know, getting jobs in the industry, and just doing really amazing work. And so the nice thing is this really talented team with lots of different connections. We honed in on what Jim's calling, and because Jim is going to be our keynote, the creator core competencies. So as a creator, what are the overall things that you need to know and to do in order to be a professional? Because that's one thing that I think is really great about Gamma Expo. For those who are creators who haven't gone, it's a business to business show. You're not demoing your games for just, you know, people that you might want to sell to. You would be if you're demoing in a game, it's to a publisher, right? So it's a
Or to a
con where people
retailer
or to a retailer,
that are
sure.
going to buy, you know, a case or
Right. If
whatever.
it's right, if your game is already out. But if you're wanting
Yeah,
to
yeah.
pitch games, um, it's so incredibly helpful, like all the sessions that we're doing. I'm really excited about. I'm also really excited that there's just so many opportunities for me as a designer. When I would have conversations at Gamma Expo, it was like, let's make a deal. Like, what do we need to do to like make this work? And instead of just like, oh, okay, like it is action oriented. People want to come out of there with like a suitcase of contracts, one way or the other. They want to see stuff happen at that show. So if you're not sure if it's right for you, I would say give it a shot. Because I think that just the knowledge that you would gain, I think is really great from what we're trying to put together, but also all of the opportunities for networking, for socializing, that we're putting
Mhm.
together to try to help and support people. I'm doing a couple different game design. You know, I'm doing a couple little talks myself, which I'm excited about. But that's, you know, we're talking like the core competencies in intellectual property, contracts and licenses, working with others, the tabletop market, creator best practices, business basics, media, social media, marketing, and just the industry and its history. So
Yeah.
there's lots of different things that if you are doing this on your own, those are things you kind of like have always had to kind of pick up and glean, you know?
Hmm.
Whereas to have like dedicated sessions for that, I think there's a lot. Now you might be saying, Kathleen, what do you get out of selling this? I'm like, I'm separate. You know what I mean? Like I'm a game designer myself primarily. That's
Yeah.
kind of, I mean, when it comes to like thinking about this, there's the educator side is, you know, all the sessions, what are we doing? What's the complete package we're doing? But being a game designer myself, there's a lot of things that I would like to know more about UI, UX in
Hmm.
game design. I would like to know more about, I'm just looking through all the different things, building a long-term career, you know, a
Well, yeah,
virtual table.
the thing that I'm hearing in listening to those core competencies as you list them off is like there is, I mean, it's kind of like what you were talking about. It's almost what you were talking about like before about like what works for you, right? Because
Hmm.
there is there is like because I run into this with people that I talk to where there's game design and that is a thing and there's lots of ways to
Hmm.
do it and but then there are people who are game designers who like to make games and then they write them down and that's it. They don't want to publish games. They don't want to be in conversation with other game designers. They don't want to try to sell their
Hmm.
designs. They're just like, oh, I designed it and you can have fun doing it. And now I'm on to the next design and it works.
Hmm.
I'm going to figure out that puzzle of game design for myself, the next one, you know. But
Hmm.
like all those things, those core competencies that you talked about, those are all for people who want to like work in the industry and get
Yes.
stuff to the public. Like
Yes.
that's sort of like another, of course, as a publisher myself, I'm like
Hmm.
I feel like it's the leveling up, but I don't want to be judgmental about it. Like it is a different path, I guess. It's a different thing you're trying to do if you're trying to do all of the game design stuff, but then also sell your designs and know know what the market is so that you know what kind of games what's hot right now and what are people
Right.
talking about. You know, I better
Right.
design one of those. You know,
Right.
that's a very different way of interacting with the industry than
Right.
just, you know, I had fun. I
What
designed a game. It's got a card
mm-hmm.
mechanic. There it is. It would be
Mm-hmm.
cool, you know.
Right. And I've
I don't, I
like
guess I didn't really answer the question, but like that's my observation, right? Is that you're really offering that particular professionalization process.
yeah, and the things that would be really hard to learn on your own. And that's the other
Hmm.
thing too, is one thing that's different about the way we've approached this is there were people who did submit some ideas for this through when Gamma opened up its just general submissions. But what we did as a team was to come up with what are the things that would be really helpful for people to know, what covers these different bases, and then who are the people in the industry that can speak to those things. And that's,
Hmm.
you know, because there are people that would not put, you know, they wouldn't necessarily submit anything. They wouldn't necessarily think to do it. But when you go up and say, hey, you know a lot about this, would you be willing to talk on a panel about this? There's a lot of people who are like, that, you know, they would love to give back. We're very clear that this isn't for promotion. You know, like if you can say, like, you know, like I'm Kathleen Mercury, I designed this, you know, and then move on. I'm not saying, and then you can go to the WizKids website and you can probably still buy that thing, you know. I don't even know if it's still for sale, quite honestly. Um,
Well, we'll check
but
and see. It'll be in the it'll be in the description if you can.
last I checked, there was a copy for sale on Amazon for $8.99. So there may be other ways to look for the copies of the game. You know, it's
There
who
you go.
doesn't love a bargain? Who doesn't love a bargain? I got my money. It's all good. I had fun. I learned a lot. But anyway, so I got distracted by that. What were we talking
Well, you
about?
were talking about the like pulling in the resources, the contacts,
Yes.
this person would be good to speak on this topic, and you know the with the names that you said there, like you're working with a team of people in the creative section of Gamma that are
Hmm.
like that know everybody, you know, so
Yes,
like
right. And that it's meant to be just professional knowledge sharing, not
mhm,
promotion, you know, so that's
right.
why for certain things, like for you know, like a session on crowdfunding, it's not just one person from Kickstarter, one person from Game Founder, one person from, you know, it's a compilation of people. So they're sharing their professional expertise in a way that's meant to benefit the audience as much as it may benefit them, if not, I mean, more for the audience. That's the goal. So I
Right.
think in that realm, because especially one of the things about Design Today, we got a lot of positive feedback. We didn't have time to solicit. We only had a couple months to put it together. So we didn't have time to solicit. So we just said, can you talk about this? Can you talk about this? Can you talk about this? And the people were like, yeah, great, happy to. So, I mean, and I'm still getting messages from people saying, "Hey, I would still love to speak if it's time." One of the problems that we did have is it's not a problem with a P, capital P, but if you're a publisher, you probably are going and probably not paying your own way unless you're your own publisher, of course, obviously. But if you're a lot of creators like me who are freelance, like we'd have to pay our way. So Gamma membership if you don't have it, flight, hotel, all the
Yeah.
other stuff.
Yeah.
So for a lot of creatives, I wanted to make sure that we were able to hold back on some spaces so that when creators made the decision to go, which was going to be later, that we could still work them in. And so I'm glad that we've been able to figure out kind of ways to do that. Would have been better to have the sessions and all the people doing them, a couple months ago to just boom hit play, yes, but I wanted to make sure that it wasn't because a lot of the publishers that we're talking to are also creators themselves, obviously, but it is something different if you're just I'm on my own doing my thing.
Yeah.
Here's this for you. It's just different types of voices. So
Yeah.
it's been a lot of fun to put it together and to create a comprehensive program that I think has a lot of benefits for people who really are serious about wanting to move from maybe the amateur, adapting, that sort of thing to because that's what we were looking at, sort of like not a beginner necessarily, but there's not a like, so you want to design a game session. That was last week at OrcaCon. Um, this is, you've designed some now. How do you take your career?
Yeah.
How do you
Yeah.
take, your hobby plus to the next level?
Yeah. Yeah. Hobby Plus is where it is, for sure.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I heard it's so looking at the map of the con, like and I don't think it's more days, but I think it's arranged pretty differently. The time seems to be arranged differently. I don't know if
hmm
well, whatever that doesn't matter, but like the at least for the exhibit hall, there's going to be more. The exhibit hall is more full, like it's more open.
hmm
So presumably that many more people than that have those other booths are all going to be at the show. So it's like it was bigger last year. At least that was the word on this. As somebody who last year was my first year, the event
hmm
was bigger last year than it had been in previous years, and it's bigger this year than it was last year based on how
Right.
much room in the hall all the booths are taking up. So
hmm
it really is like a it's like you talked about networking earlier. It's
hmm
all there's a whole lot of people coming, so like you can probably find someone to talk to about the thing that you're interested in learning more about,
hmm
whether that's in a panel or informally, and so it is
Yeah.
kind of it's an industry event. If you're there for business, it's business. It's all
Yeah.
the business stuff.
Because even if you're not sure, then, obviously this may not be the year for you, but I think if anything, it could be a good time to say, is this, like I was saying before, going back to the beginning, like knowing you, knowing your process, is this a world you really want to be a part of? Before
Yeah.
you spend a lot of time, doing things on your own to prepare for it. Is going to this going to help you from making some mistakes? There's lots of things people do because they're really excited and they want to do it, and all of a sudden, you know, they've spent a lot of money paying for art on a prototype, and that might not be the best use of your money, especially if a
Yeah. Not.
publisher wants to strip it all away, or
Yeah. Yeah.
like, so there's lots of things. I mean, because this is also an industry that as a designer, you can open up your own business and self-publish, or you can try to license. And both of those have very specific things you need to be mindful of going forward
Yeah.
so that you get the results that you're happy with as part of a team, even if you're working on your own and working in those two different
Well,
avenues.
I mean, almost nobody, you say working as a team, like almost nobody does it truly all alone. Like there are some,
Correct.
there are some
hmm
that are their own writer, artist, designer, publisher, social media person, they do it all, but
hmm
even if you've designed a game, even if you are the artist, like unless you also own a factory, you still need to be part of a team.
Right.
to produce items at the end.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Yeah.
it's such a
One of the
collaborative industry at every level. And yeah.
Yeah, because one of the sessions is the publishing process, who you don't see.
Mm,
After you sign your game and you sign it to a publisher, what are all the fatal flaws that can happen along the way that could kill your game? I think that's helpful to know because A, that's realistic. But the other
hmm.
thing too is,
Sometimes
are there
ships full of cargo containers sink, like it has happened.
That absolutely has happened. But moreover, if there's things if there are decisions that you could make in the design process, I mean,
Mm,
I'm thinking about this as a game designer, and obviously for people who want to be a publisher, like this is my personal lens, what I'm saying. It's not all towards that, but what are the fatal flaws in a game design that might be problematic later? One of my games that I signed, I got it back. I've had a hard time finding a publisher for it because of a component thing. And I didn't think it was going to be that big of a problem for someone else to solve, but I didn't solve it. And I had a publisher that it went through internal publishing or playtesting, it went through external playtesting. They loved it. They just didn't like this one thing about it, and they couldn't find a solution. And I got the game back,
yeah,
and lesson learned,
yeah.
you know,
It,
solve problems first. Don't expect others to do it. Because I just didn't think it was that big of a deal because the game itself is good and solid and interesting.
right, right.
Um,
I
but
mean, our Wet Ink, my company has just gotten into, we've done two board games. Well, we're getting ready to send the files for our second board
hmm
game to print. And I say board game loosely because it comes in a box, but
hmm
it's just cards. Our first one is like, there were some tokens, but you didn't even need the tokens really. We just could have
hmm
done cards. And the second one is the same way, where it's like, there's going to be some tokens and it's cards. And we haven't made like, eventually maybe we'll do a cardboard punch out. That's I think the next
hmm
one that we're going to do, but like manufacturing up because we're learning it, we're teching up,
right,
right? Start with a box of
right.
cards. That's
Yes.
there's no other components to break, but like if you're like those games the what's the game? I can't remember the name of it, but is it TikTok Woodman where you like have to tap
Oh
use
yeah.
the axe and
Yeah.
tap the stack
hmm
of trees and like I mean all of that injection molded plastic. I mean there are experts that make that stuff, but like me trying to imagine like me being responsible to deliver that to market is like, oh
hmm
no, that is not something I want to do today. So start small and but the components they matter, I guess
Right.
is what I'm
Right. If I was starting a game company and someone pitched me a game that was like incredible, but far outside my knowledge realm to get it done,
hmm.
sometimes you just gotta pass.
Yeah.
I just think back years and years and years ago, a friend of mine was starting a game, a real estate company, including buying houses and flipping them and all that. And he would pass on the pretty house if the numbers weren't right and take the ugly house if the numbers were every time. Because there are things you can do to make it look better, but also, hold on, I just got a notification throwing that bad boy away. Thank you. So sorry. I got distracted by that. I apologize. So when it came to the house, if the pretty house numbers aren't good, don't buy it. You buy the house where the numbers are good, where you can make money from it.
Right.
And that's an important lesson because especially in real estate, you're like, this is ugly. That's beautiful. But if you're going to lose money on that, what are you trying to come out with? So I think it's just one of those things where game design is a lot like that, especially for creators. It's our baby.
Hmm.
And you want it to be this, and like so when you give it to somebody and then they're like, okay, we're gonna do a theme change, and you're like, oh, it's like, do you want it to get published? I mean, there's a
Right.
lot of really important lessons to learn about seeing your name on a box on the shelf or seeing your name on a book on the shelf. And there's fights you can win, and then there's fights that you're going to lose, but ultimately, what's your goal? So it's
Yeah.
really interesting everything that goes into getting a game onto the shelf. As a creator, we're in like the worst position. I make up things, I pitch them, I hope they like them, I spend money to go to cons. If they don't, I go home with plastic bags full of fun things, and I'm okay with that. I can afford to do that, but that's not true for everybody. If you want
Right.
to be serious about this, if you want to be successful, GAMA Expo, the creator track, is a chance to listen to some of the best people in the business actively working now to make all the toys we want to play. So,
Well, I don't think there's a better way to you just wrapped it up right there. That sounds
Yep.
great. That's the
Hmm.
final word for that.
Nailed it.
Uh, yeah, for real. Kathleen, thank you so much for your time today, for talking to us. Where can people, you've mentioned it a few times, but mention it again. Where can people find more of you and your content on the internet?
So I tend to just, my website is kind of static. I don't update or change it as much as I should, but it is free. So there you go. KathleenMercury.com. If you come across dead links, let me know. There's still a few in there that I keep forgetting about. So if you come across those, I can be found on Blue Sky at, oh gosh, am I Kathleen Mercury at Blue Sky, or I'm probably Mercury with seven M's, like Mercury. I'm probably there. You can message me through my website, or you can, I'm on Facebook for a lot of folks in the game industry too. I'm on LinkedIn. Mercury is my legal last name because I'm fun. So, yeah, many places.
Excellent. Thank you so much again. And thank you for everyone who watched this video. Hopefully it's been useful for you and got some game ideas about it, out of it maybe.
Like and subscribe.
That's right. Like and subscribe. And I don't know. What do we what's your favorite game from that you would like to use see used in a classroom? Put that in the comments so we can go
Mm.
and check it out. What are your game ideas? What would you
Uh,
teach? What game and what subject? You
my
teaching?
Yeah, so my favorite game from a design standpoint is Escape. There's different titles now. Now it's Escape the Island, but it's
Yeah, yeah.
Atlantis, Escape. Yeah.
The
Yeah,
lowest things
mhm.
disappear first, and you got to get to the
Yeah.
boats, and there's sea
Yeah,
monsters, and yeah.
Julian Cortland Smith's game. Yeah, my favorite game from a design standpoint. And one time I had a student who was so appalled that the people had different values, and she just did not think that was okay. And I was like, all right, well, you guys are now going, and this is eighth grade, so there were kids that wanted to do game design again because normally I just do it seventh grade. And I was like, okay, here's because I had a lot of copies of the game because it's my favorite. Here's, broke them into groups. Here's this. Make co-op versions, save them
Mm,
all. And they did, and it was really cool to see. So you can always, what if is the best question in the world to lead to whatever. So I would love to hear what people are doing with games in their
that's
classrooms too.
that's cool. That's cool.
Yeah,
Uh, all right. Thank you for watching. Thank you for doing this, Kathleen. We'll
you're
see
welcome.
you in a few weeks. We'll see you probably in person.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. All right.